Today, I get the chance to sit with my mom and talk about her selling our childhood home. It's something we know a lot of baby boomers and people in her age bracket are dealing with. The thought of selling and taking on what that next chapter might bring. She's got some great insight. It's been a long time coming. There's been a lot of conversation building up to this. So sit back, listen, and hopefully find something that might help you making some of these decisions with you or your parents. It's been a long time coming to get you in here.
Yes.
Because you've had a lot going on.
A lot going on. Moved this last year.
I know. I heard.
Yep.
Sold my house.
Yep. Sold the family home.
Well, that's what I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
I want to hear some of that story and hear, I guess the thought process that goes into it. And because there's a lot of people out there dealing with that right now that are saying, hey, do we need this anymore? Grandkids are everywhere else. A lot to maintain, so figuring out that process of how to think through that. Is it purely financial? Is it lifestyle? Is it, what kind of decisions need to be made to kind of get you to the finish line of that decision?
Yeah.
So tell me about it.
I think it's all of that. So if you had asked me 2 years ago, are we selling the house? I would have said no. I think we even talked about that. I'm like, no, you're going to have to sell when we die. We lived there 30 years, raised 3 kids there, and everything was great. We loved our house. We fixed it like we wanted it. And
it was a 1-story. Your bedroom was on the first floor.
We were so smart to buy that 30 years ago in a good neighborhood with good schools. And yeah, it had nothing to do with that. We had the pool, we had the backyard, we had it exactly like we wanted it. I think the turn came being in real estate when I started selling all of my friends' homes. And so one by one, the people that we had raised children with in the same area began to sell and move. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. I never thought they would move. One moved to Tallahassee to live near their granddaughter. One moved to take care of aging parents. One moved to a 55 plus community. So it was all different reasons, but it made me start thinking about, well, it was almost like FOMO. It was like, well, what's going on? Like, why is everybody moving and I'm just still sitting here? And there were actually quite a few people in our neighborhood that had been there as long or longer than me, that were maybe a decade older than me. And they definitely were in it for the long haul. They were staying. They were the stayers. But I just started thinking about it and didn't see myself there. So my husband and I started talking about, well, like, is this where we want to finish out our life? Because you do start thinking about those kind of things. And I said, well, all of our friends are gone. The places that we frequented before, like our church has moved. We're in a different church, so it's not local. It doesn't matter if we're in an A-rated school district. We don't have any kids going to school. The values had gone up significantly. We bought for, a quarter of what it was probably worth at that time, maybe 20% of what it was worth. So we had a lot of equity in the house. So in our situation, we did not have a mortgage on the house, but the upkeep of a 30-year-old house comes into play. So I like to look at numbers and see kind of on paper, what does it look like? And when I started looking at it, we're like, okay, what do we spend on a monthly basis? No mortgage, just taxes, insurance, yard care, pool care, bug spray, this breaks, that breaks. And it came up to a pretty significant number. And I'm like, shoot, I thought we were doing pretty good because we didn't have a mortgage, And then when you look at that, you're like, well, there is a cost to live here. Even if you don't have a mortgage, there is a cost to live here. So when we realized that, it made me go, okay, that's interesting. So then it became the question, do we want to live here? Because we are paying to live here. So we started looking at, okay, what do we want our life to look like the next 10 years? And for us, we wanted to be more present with our kids and grandkids. So, for instance, like you live in Orlando. It's 20 minutes from here. It's not that big a deal. But your life's here. Your life's in this area. Your kids' ball games are here. So what we noticed is we're coming to you, right? More than, because you guys are in that busy stage. So we're coming to you instead of, you coming to us. Yeah, I mean, there's some of that come, on some holidays and stuff like that, but it just became a little different. So we're like, is it worth keeping a house for a couple of holidays and an occasional visit? So that was kind of the process of thinking through it. So then it's like, okay, if we want to be closer to our grandkids, what does that look like? Obviously, we didn't need that much space. We wanted to kind of get rid of have set expenses, like know what our expenses are. So for us, what made sense is to move into, we had already purchased a condo on the beach that we were renting out. We're like, we could just live there and still drive and see the kids. It doesn't matter to them because they're not coming to us much. And we'll still go to them. We're still young enough to drive. So we look at this as like our 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Was the move for us. It was like a 5-year. Like, this isn't permanent. This may not be permanent. Maybe it is. But for our time in our life where we're still both working, semi-working, and want to travel, we wanted to be freer, reduce expenses, and have a different lifestyle, basically.
Yeah. So you were in a house you could have stayed in. Like
100%.
That was, a lot of people make that decision of like, I want to pick a home that I'm not going to be forced to move out of. But it is interesting thinking about the, the cost of it, because the traditional financial plan assumes pay down, pay off the house, and you can live happily ever after. And, maybe everybody didn't fall into that traditional bucket, but with people living so much longer, you guys are at a retirement age, quote unquote, that, is still very early, everybody's very healthy. And so we're seeing that where people are retiring and you have a whole 2 chapters left in that retirement phase, right? Or more. And so the idea of the maintenance, unless that's something you just love doing, taking care of a yard and doing all these things, sounds like you decided that, man, it's not a retirement position from a financial standpoint, because this house still has a lot of upkeep and the house is only getting older. It's going to only require more and more, repairs and stuff as time goes on. So dive into that a little bit more. Like, what was the other option, right? Because yes, the house is paid off. I think people get stuck in that of like, well, I'm going to stay in this house because it's paid off. But in reality, you had all that equity to make a decision with what you were going to do with it. So kind of what was the new positioning of that equity?
So for us, we didn't want to take on another mortgage. So we used the equity to pay cash for a smaller place, but it also left a significant amount of cash to just stick in the bank. And so that was one thing that I hadn't paid attention to when we were initially thinking of this. I thought, well, we're going to save, a couple $1,000s a month on expenses. But I hadn't thought about the cash position in that I'm going to have cash in the bank that now they are sending me a check. So not only was I saving the money on my expenses, but I was also earning money on the equity of my property. So for me, I had some friends that waited maybe 10 to 15 years beyond what I did. Maybe they're 75. Well, they went from their family home to more of like what I would call, it's a 55 plus, but there's a lot of these popping up all over the country where you buy in, whether it's 300,000 or 500,000, and you basically live there, until you die. They have everything. They have duplexes, they have apartments, assisted living, nursing home. And I have had 3 separate sets of friends that have gone to that. And some of them fairly young, closer to the 55 than the 75. But that's why, I mean, I didn't want to make that jump. I think it's a great fit for some people. I know 4 different couples that have made that choice. One, because they don't have any children, and they're like, we want to pick where we want to age. Mm-hmm. And they're like, we don't want our other family telling us we need to move back north. So they were like, we're going to go ahead and make this choice. And I actually talked to a couple. I was actually at one of these communities this week, and I talked to a couple I didn't know. They had lived all over. They lived in Colorado. They had lived in 3 different places in Florida. And I said, well, how did you end up here? It's in the middle of Central Florida. John Knox is the name of the community. Beautiful community. I know several people that live there and absolutely love it. Restaurants, tons of restaurants and swimming pools and biking paths. And it's just a really nice place to live. And I said, why did you move here? And they're like, well, it just made sense for us. We have 2 adult kids. Neither of them live near us. And, you know, when we die, this place just takes care of everything. Our kids don't have to worry anything. And of course, your dad said, well, I want them worried about all our stuff. So sorry, we're not going there. But yeah, for us, it was more of a cash position. So if you think about it, like I just turned 60 this year, which was another big kind of like, oh, I'm 60, my husband's 65. So we're in that, we're actually going to potentially get Social Security, right? Mm-hmm. Which you don't really think or count on. So there were some other positions like that changed as well. So it was a mix of all of that made sense to me. So if I'm moving, say, 10 or 15 years earlier than the other people, then over that amount of time, that money that I saved in expenses on my house and making money on my money over 15 years is a pretty significant amount of money.
Yeah.
So it allows you to, I would think it allows your money to go further, because I think we're sitting on a lot of our retirement. A lot of baby boomers are sitting on a lot of real estate. I think I read that 40% of the real estate is owned by baby boomers right now. So,
now what would you say to those baby boomers? Because the other stories right now are that a lot of boomers are deciding to stay in their house because they, you know, maybe they didn't live there as long as you did. So they still have a mortgage. They bought it at a great time. And they feel like, hey, if I go buy something else, I'm going to be, you know, even if I need to downsize, I don't need this much house. I'm going to go from a 2.99% interest rate from when I refinanced down to, you know, so I guess the question is it more of a qualitative decision at times? Like, is it like, just go, you're going to feel great about the decision. You know, it's not purely a financial decision, although that was a factor, but it sounds like more of the factor was, we don't need this. No one's here. We want to be where family is and be able to be more and more involved in sports and school stuff and all the rest of it. So how do you balance those two? Because if everything's a financial decision, you know, then it's just, you know, it's a spreadsheet decision, but it doesn't sound like that was the full breadth of y'all's conversations.
Yeah, it wasn't just for us, but if I look at all of all of my friends who I've recently sold or clients who have moved, most of them, it wasn't a financial decision. It was a lifestyle decision. So that's what's interesting to me, because I've seen the same studies where it says that people aren't moving. They're going to sit and then they're going to pass that house down to their kids, which is what we initially had thought, until we started really looking at it and going, you know, maybe that's not the best decision, because I wasn't ready to just say, okay, I'm done. This is the last house I'm going to live in for the rest of my life. The interesting thing about it is being in different places. We've talked about, like, it's almost good for your brain, because you're so used to doing the same thing all the time. And now you're in a new place with new people and new restaurants and things like that. So I think it just kind of like enlivens you a little bit too, with some to be different for differences, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. The other story that's been floating around is the amount of maybe much smaller homes that are being built by builders. There's an overwhelming amount of like 2-bedroom homes being built compared to years past, right? Traditionally, it was, much larger 4-bedroom plus kind of homes was kind of the leading, home style. And so I wonder how much of that is boomers, and I wonder how much of that is Gen Z. It seems like we got a lot of people that are now kind of fighting for that easy, low maintenance, maybe urban walking ability kind of home. So how much space did you pivot to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we didn't have a huge house. Now, here's what I saw a lot of our friends do, which we didn't do. A lot of people will buy their starter home, then they'll buy their move up home, then they have kids, and then they're like, oh, we need more space. And there was a time when we had 3, a couple teenagers and an older, we're like, I feel like we need some more space. It'd be great if we had a bonus room. We even talked about adding on at that point, but we kind of just like, we're just going to make this work. It's not forever. So we kind of stayed. We're about 2,700 square feet, all on one floor, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. That was even difficult when you have 3 kids. But we did not upsize.
3 boys. It wasn't too bad.
That's true. Boys don't care as much as girls about bathrooms. So it ended up being a great house for us, and we could have stayed in it. It was perfectly comfortable. It had nothing to do with that. So I think what I'm seeing is it's not necessarily people are moving for the benefit of the financial upside, but it is an upside we need to talk about, because I think people think they're stuck in their house because it's paid off. And I would beg to differ. Like, maybe you ought to really talk to a real estate professional to see if that's the case. Because, if you want to sell your house and then turn around and buy something smaller in the same neighborhood, maybe it doesn't make sense. But if you're moving to a different area, in an area where the prices maybe are a little bit lower, or you're downsizing. Because when you think about it, when you're downsizing from a bigger house to a smaller house or a house to a condo, your expenses also decrease. Mm-hmm. And one thing I think people may not be aware, but if you're in the state of Florida and you move within 3 years, you can take your savings on your taxes. It's called the portability rate, or the Save Our Home savings, as we talk about it. You can take it with you to your next house. So people are a little scared about, well, my taxes are going to go up. Well, maybe not. Yeah. Maybe they're not. Maybe they go down.
If you're going to a smaller house, they're most certainly going to go down, as a function of being able to take your portability. And the other piece of that is your capital gains, exemption on the sale of your home. So especially kind of where our market's gone now is like you get to this period where the market has gone up and you're able to take that cash and go decide what you're going to do with it. There could be a time, if y'all had waited another 20 years to make this decision, maybe the market is not as hot, or your community wasn't as thriving as it is now, right? And so you never know what the future holds, because your home value is also relative to what's going on around that town and what newer communities and what else you can get. So, and obviously the amount of maybe work that would need to be done on it, because we've sold plenty of homes that grandma and grandpa had with a lot of deferred maintenance, and just because it gets so much harder to take care of in time.
Yeah. 100%. That was part of the conversation, because we were at a pivotal point where we, as we upgraded our house. It was in great condition, and we had updated several parts of the house. There were 2 big things left to do. And to show you how we really weren't planning on moving, like the year before, we put in 2 brand new state-of-the-art air conditioners. We paid a ridiculous sum of money for them. So we really were not planning on moving. It's great for the homeowners that have it now, but we definitely put the money into it. But the 2 things that I wanted to do was a kitchen, and the windows were original, 30-year-old windows, 35-year-old windows. And so being in real estate, I knew that I'm going to spend probably $150,000 additional on this house. But I knew I could not increase the value of my house by that much. So it became this decision, am I going to just put those upgrades in and stay? Or am I just going to go ahead and go? And that was another decision because I'm like, okay, now not only am I saving its expenses monthly, but I'm about to save $150,000 too that I didn't need to spend.
Well, that'd be the other argument, even moving in the same community, is like if you can move into something that has had all that work done to kind of reset your timeline of things you're going to need to do, may make sense for somebody. So, yeah, it's interesting hearing through that. What are the experiences you've seen from other friends maybe that have done it maybe poorly, maybe jumped the gun a little quick? And with all that being said, a lot of folks haven't stayed in their house as long as you did, right? So the draw to the family home wasn't really a factor. It was like, yeah, it's a house, we'll move. I mean, we've worked with a bunch of those folks together that, it was a 5-year home and it's easy come, easy go. But what have you seen, in that mindset where maybe they make a decision a little too quick?
It's funny you asked that. And I have a good friend who will probably watch this and she'll know I'm talking about her. They made the best decision they could with the information they had. They moved to take care of aging parents out of state. The parents wouldn't move to them, and there were no other siblings to take care of them, so they felt obligated to go. And they went. It didn't work out quite like what they thought it would be. And now they're considering returning back to the exact same market they were in before when they left. The good news for them is if they buy again, they've bought within 3 years of selling. So as you and I know, that's great because they can still take advantage of the Save Our Home savings if you buy within 3 years of selling. So they have that. She thought she would be able to get a job where they were going, and there just weren't jobs to be had. So that was one where I think, was it a mistake? I don't think it was a mistake because they made the decision they needed to make at that time. And as I was talking to her today, I said, to me, like you're getting out of a 3-story home is what they sold here. Now you're probably not going to buy a 3-story home this time.
For a little longer.
Yeah. So, I mean, other than time out of your life to do that. And I respect that they're taking care of the parents because, the baby boomer generation, depending on if you're the older or the younger, I'm on the younger end, the very end of the baby boomers, but I have aging parents. So, that was another consideration because I'm traveling to them every other month to help take care of them. So by doing that, the less upkeep I have on a house or property because I'm busy with work and traveling to take care of parents and seeing grandkids. To me, it just, I'm like, just made sense.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the upside of what you've done, right? So you love to travel. And how has that changed, or has it changed since kind of making this decision to kind of get in a smaller house, get in a condo, lower maintenance? Does that feel easier to kind of come and go, or?
Definitely. With a condo, it has made it easier to travel and not have to worry about getting those calls from the neighbor that, there's a leak in your front yard and it's coming out of the ground and it's flooding your yard, which happened, or the pool turned green because the pump quit running, so yes, those kind of things definitely simplify the process. I don't think condo living's for everybody. And, I don't think I'm saying that, sell your house and go to a condo so you don't have, because that's not for everybody. I think you have to decide what works for you. And for us, the condo worked well. It's a small condo building. It's not huge. And, even though, yes, there are condo fees, which that's where a lot of people don't want to go condo because there's condo fees. I would encourage people to go add up what they spend on their house.
Right.
It's probably the same or less if you really add it all up. So there are expenses on a house. You're just paying them in a lump sum.
You're paying them, on the regular. You've got your cleaning and you've got your landscape and you've got your, other bills. But then you get your big replacement costs, roofs that have to be replaced and ACs that have to be replaced. And so I think that's the interesting thing when you look at condos and how they run is they have to budget and forecast these things out over long periods of time. So you're just paying for those things in lockstep as you live in it and as these things depreciate.
If the condos run well.
If it's run well.
So that's the problem. That's another reason to talk to a real estate professional, because especially condos in Florida, after the destruction of the one in South Florida that happened a few years ago that was so terrible, they have implemented new laws that are forcing condominiums to keep a certain amount of money in reserves and to have inspections on the regular, which wasn't happening. So it's all good. I do think there are going to be some deals to be had. I know there's going to be some deals to be had in Florida because there are some big assessments coming, and some people, unfortunately, that have lived in there can't afford them. So I think South Florida specifically, there might be some really good deals coming up in the future. Yeah. And people are always going to want to move to Florida because of the weather. So I think even though the values are going to potentially go down in those buildings because of the assessments, I think the long-term return will be good.
Yeah. And yeah, even with that, making it almost dummy proof for you, right? To be able to not worry about it when you're gone. Because the same thing could happen in a house, right? If you weren't planning for it properly, at some point that roof has to be replaced. And I think that's what people feel is like, well, it's kind of sad that they can't pay those assessments, but it's been because of deferred maintenance. You've got away without that expense for a long time. And so now, just like if your roof was caving in and you've got to go live somewhere else and sell this house at a loss, that's the exact same thing that's happening with condos. So I agree with you. I think when you look at all in, there's not that many differences from a financial standpoint comparing the two.
Right. So when we looked at the expenses we were incurring on the house, I was looking at normal maintenance, right? Like you were talking about landscaping, pool care, cleaning, bug spray, those kind of things. And so you can't compare those costs and look at maybe a condo HOA fee and go, oh, well, I'm spending less. Because exactly what you're saying, people aren't thinking about the big items that are going to come down the road that they are not thinking of.
So quick tip for anybody watching this, you have a house and maybe I know there's the folks out there that are highly detailed. They plan everything. But for most people, we aren't that way. Take your roof. What would your roof cost to replace, right? Divide it over. I would be conservative with a 20-year kind of figure. You could go 15 to 20. But if nothing else, you're putting money away for something that we know is going to have to be replaced one day. The roof is never a surprise when it's got to be replaced, unless it's like due to storm damage or something that was unexpected. Same thing with your AC. Same thing with, if there's anything else like structural stuff that's going to come, divide these things over their life expectancy and come up with a monthly figure that you can have automatically go into this reserves account. It's the exact same thing that most commercial buildings do, commercial property, managers do, is they collect for reserves for replacement at some point in the future. So simple little thing that you could do for your house to avoid surprises.
I think a lot of people count on insurance roofs, as they call them. Well, hopefully we'll have a hailstorm or we'll have, God forbid, a hurricane, but it damages the roof and I'll get a free roof. As we know, insurances in Florida costs have gone up like dramatically. So that's another thought when you're moving as well, is the cost of insuring a 35-year-old home is very different than the cost of insuring a new home because of the building standards. So the building standards have changed over time. I mean, even just like since Hurricane Andrew, they changed. Every time we have a hurricane, it seems like they improve those standards. So if you're in a older house and you're hanging on to it, that's another thing to consider as your insurance cost.
Right, for sure. I want to ask you, I watched your moving process. I've moved a few times. I had kids and all their stuff and, dog and all the rest of it during our moves. It felt like total chaos. And I watch a lot of people move. You guys seem to have all your ducks in a row. You seem to make one of the more efficient moves I've seen.
Really?
Yep. And so I wanted to just hear for somebody, because the move is a stressful thing for a lot of people during this process. You want to be excited about the new house and where you're going and do all the decorations and all the stuff. But then you get hit with this like, oh crap, we got to get 30 years of junk out of here. How'd that go? How'd you plan it? And how did you execute it?
So for me, I am not a saver, I would say. I'm more of a minimalist. But still, you've been in a house for 30 years, you still have stuff.
Yeah. I wouldn't say you were a minimalist. All your cabinets had stuff in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like you were you go in there and you've got 2 things in there. Like, to me, that's the minimalist mindset. You're not a hoarder.
No.
You're not a minimalist. You're probably more in the middle.
All right.
Just to set the picture for people, right? You still had to move a lot of stuff.
I had a lot of stuff. I don't typically we had cleaned the attic out previous to this, but we still had a lot of stuff in the attic.
Yeah.
So in my mindset, since we were downsizing, I had to kind of compartmentalize the different parts of the house. So my first go-to was to stage the house and to get the pictures first. Then let's get rid of the furniture that we don't want to keep. If it doesn't need to be in the showing, let's just go ahead and get rid of it. You will be surprised at how difficult getting rid of furniture is. Some of it you literally can't give away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people don't realize that. I actually had this conversation with a client today and saw it in action with a client yesterday who was sitting in her garage. She had cleared the whole house out. She had furniture that was left that wouldn't fit in the pod to move. She was waiting on Salvation Army to pick it up. They came. I was there. And they looked at it and they're like, oh, yeah, we can't take that because it's got scratch on it.
Mm.
Yeah, we're not going to take that couch just because I don't think we could sell it. So literally, she's giving them furniture to go sell. And they wouldn't take it. I believe out of the 6 items she had outside, they took 1 thing.
Wow. So
I experienced that as well. I mean, in the end, luckily, the people buying our house, I just started taking pictures and said, do you want me to leave this? Do you want me to leave this? And luckily, it was a young family moving in that didn't have a lot. So they were like, anything you want to leave, leave. So that worked great for us because we left a dining room table and chairs. Those are the hardest things to get rid of, dining room tables.
Those are huge.
Nobody wants them.
Yeah.
Most people don't have them anymore. Those are hard to get rid of. So as far as packing, we started doing it room by room, basically. So we would take a room at a time. And we picked one room as a staging room. So we got everything out of that. We're like, okay, this is the room. Now, for us, it was difficult because we had stuff going to 3 different places. We decided for us, we still needed a garage to hold stuff. So we rented a garage near our condo. So basically, most of the stuff in the attic that was in the garage anyways went to the garage. So we made 2 trips over there with our stuff and got that out. And then we had to divide the stuff between 2 different places because we have 2 condos now. Instead of a house and a condo, we have a condo that we live in and a small one down by our other son. So we had to divide, like, we called it, is it going to NSB or is it going south? I think I said north or south. So I just started writing a big N and a big S. One room had the N stuff and one room had the S stuff in it. And then we hired a local company. I was actually shocked at how inexpensive. I think from a referral, I got a great company, family owned, to move stuff 2 hours, 2.5 hours. It took them a day, and wasn't near what I expected. Now, if you're going interstate, to another state or something, that's a different story. But the moving cost didn't cost much, but we boxed it all.
Yeah.
Now for us, it worked out great because some of our great friends had unlimited number of boxes. He owns a warehouse, and he was like, just come get boxes. And so I did. I just every day would go fill my car up, and we would just pack every day we would pack. So, I mean, I would say in all, it probably took us 2 weeks to pack it all. But I will tell you that we still have boxes of pictures that we are still going through. And I'm even doing that this week. I'm bringing a box in the den every night, and I'm going through them. And if it's a picture I like, I scan it. Like, I've decided the days of just having boxes of pictures is just nobody's going to open them and look at them. If it's not online, they're not going to look at it. And it's kind of the same way with me, So we're scanning our pictures and putting them in the Google Drive, or we used iMemories to have a lot of things scanned. It's been nice. It feels like purging felt good. It was like a cleansing. The thing I couldn't get rid of that I'm still hanging on to is some family china.
Yep.
That was like a great aunt's china from Germany. So that's really pretty. I doubt I'll use it, but keeping that.
You're gonna keep burdening somebody else with that in the future.
I'm keep it in a box, and then you're gonna get it in 20 years.
I love old things. But yeah, you're right. It'll probably go in our storage unit, and then.
Well, I think that's what I realized, like, just from seeing my parents, right? So my parents are in their late 80s. They have a big house and a lot of stuff, like a lot of stuff from years of entertaining, right? And, my mom started giving away things to the kids and the grandkids.
Nativity scene collections.
The what collections?
The nativity scenes.
The nativities. Yep. They started. She started
big
giving.
Collection.
Yeah, and she still probably has 20 sets.
It's a lot.
A lot. But what am I gonna do when I have to clean that out? And it is kind of the same thing. You just kind of begin to wonder, like, what do you really need? If I haven't looked at it in a year or two, I'm probably not gonna, I probably don't need it.
I think about that how often when we're, if we travel, and that's when you need the bare minimum, right? I mean, yes, it's different because you're not hosting and you're not doing all these things, but like we do, and we really enjoy those times. So it's like there is a minimalist effect there that's like, I could live like this to some extent, So yeah, I agree. It's like how we carry all these things around and almost in a burdensome way sometimes. But so look into the camera and give somebody the freedom to
let it go,
unhitch themselves from that wagon, and there's a whole new chapter ahead.
Yeah. It feels really good, I think, at this point. Again, for us, it was like, the 5-year plan. And I think for me, it was more of how do I want to live, right? So I think that's the discussion you have first. What do you want out of life? Then if the numbers make sense, and sometimes they might make more sense than you think, right? Then it's time to take action and decide what works best for you and your family. So yeah, I would say just because you turn 60 like me, don't think, well, I'm just this is what my life is and this is where I'm going to be.
You still control it, maybe more than ever.
You actually do. And that's what's interesting. I think we don't have children we have to worry about, like school districts, right? So I don't have to buy in the best school district anymore, which means I can probably buy a less expensive house because I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But I think we just get so caught up in this is just how it is and this is what I'm going to do that we just don't think about it. Sometimes we're just too busy to think about it. So I would strongly encourage you to think about it. I do think there's going to be a lot of I'll call it the baby boomer migration away from that home, that home, because I would say 2 generations ago, you had the family home and the people stayed, right? And now that jobs are moving people all over the world, the chances of your kids living around you are really rather rare. So deciding, where you want to live and what you want your life to be like is a great decision. There's a lot of freedom in that. And there can be a lot of financial freedom in it if it's looked at correctly.
Done properly.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, this has been fun. We'll do it again sometime on where in the world Cheryl is traveling with the condo locked up.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up with.
Since you didn't know where I was all the time, I created a Google Calendar. At
my request. Yeah. Yep. I was like, I got to know where you guys are.
I don't know where you are. So,
because we had this one specific weekend that we had worked hard to find a babysitter for. And then 2 days before, you're like, oh, yeah, we're coming up. And I'm like, well, that would have been nice to know before we bent over backwards all week calling every babysitter we knew.
Hey, that's what we're here for.
But we're like, but we won't be home. So come on over. We won't be there.
Yeah.
We're all figuring it out, right? It's a new chapter for everybody.
Yeah. It's a new normal. But we need to cut this short because I want to go see the kids before I leave.
Done.
Okay. Bye.